The morning sun cast ethereal ribbons of light through the crystal domes of New Zerita's floating gardens, illuminating rows of luminescent flora that swayed gently in the artificial breeze. Zara Vallones hummed softly as she tended to her prized moonbell orchids, their translucent petals catching the light like captured starshine. Her violet skin glistened with a faint sheen of moisture from the humid greenhouse air, and her silver hair was pulled back in a practical braid that still managed to shimmer with each movement. At 24 cycles old, Zara had already earned recognition as one of New Zerita's most promising botanists. The floating gardens were her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the quiet rhythms of growth and bloom, far from the bustling commercial districts below. Here, suspended 3 kilometers above the planet's surface, she felt closest to the stars that had always fascinated her. She was carefully adjusting the nutrient flow to a particularly delicate specimen when a tremendous crash shook the entire agricultural platform. Alarms began wailing across the complex as emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Zara steadied herself against her workbench, heart racing as she watched debris streak past the transparent walls of her greenhouse. Impact in Sector 7, the automated announcement echoed through the facility. Emergency teams respond immediately. All civilian personnel maintain safe distance. But curiosity had always been Zara's weakness. Instead of retreating to the safety bunkers as protocol demanded, she grabbed her emergency kit and headed toward the crash site. The path led her through emergency corridors she'd never used, past storage areas filled with equipment for the garden's maintenance systems. The crash site was a scene of twisted metal and scorched earth where what appeared to be some kind of spacecraft had torn through the platform's outer agricultural ring. Steam rose from the wreckage, carrying strange scents that made her sensitive nose twitch. The ship was unlike anything in the Zeridian fleet, sleek, angular, with hull plating that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Zara approached cautiously, her botanical training making her automatically catalog the damage to the surrounding plant life. The impact had created a small crater, but surprisingly, most of the nearby vegetation remained intact. Whatever had crashed here, the pilot had demonstrated remarkable skill in minimizing the destruction. A groan from within the wreckage made her freeze. Someone was alive in there. Her healer's instincts overrode her caution. Zara scrambled over the debris, following the sound to where a section of the hull had been torn away. Inside, she could see a figure slumped over what appeared to be a control console. "Hello," she called out in standard galactic. "Are you injured?" The figure stirred, lifting its head, and Zara's world tilted off its axis. The being that looked back at her was like nothing she had ever seen, yet somehow disturbingly familiar. Tall even while seated, with broad shoulders and a powerfully built frame. His skin was a pale peachy tan color, entirely unlike the violet, blue, or green hues of any species she knew. Short, dark brown hair covered his scalp in tight curls, and his face was angular with strong features partially obscured by facial hair. But it was his eyes that made her blood run cold. Deep brown eyes that held intelligence, pain, and something else, something that triggered a recognition so primal it bypassed all rational thought. The ancient stories. The bedtime warnings. The historical texts that spoke of the great terror from beyond the void. "Human," she whispered, the word barely audible. The being those eyes focused on her with obvious confusion. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying an accent she'd never heard before. "Thank the stars, someone who can understand me," he said, attempting to stand but wincing with obvious pain. "My name is Marcus Reed. I'm a cartographer from Earth. My ship had a navigation failure and I need to contact local authorities about temporary assistance." But Zara wasn't hearing his words anymore. Her mind was flooded with every terrifying tale she'd grown up hearing. Humans, the destroyers of worlds. The species that had supposedly conquered half the galaxy before vanishing into the dark between stars. The monsters that parents invoked to frighten misbehaving children. "Stay back," she managed to say, her voice shaking as she scrambled backward over the debris. Marcus's expression shifted from relief to concern. He raised his hands in what appeared to be a placating gesture. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need help. My ship is damaged and I need to reach someone who can assist with repairs. But the ancient fear was too strong. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far away as possible from this legendary threat. The scream tore from her throat before she could stop it, raw and piercing in the recycled air of the agricultural platform. Human. There's a human here. The effect was immediate and devastating. Emergency klaxons began blaring across the entire platform. Security barriers slammed down, sealing off sections of the facility. In the distance, she could hear the heavy footsteps of security forces mobilizing. Marcus's face went pale, his eyes widening with understanding and fear. Wait, please. I don't understand what's happening. I'm not dangerous. But Zara was already running, her legs carrying her back through the maintenance corridors while her mind reeled with the implications of what she'd seen. Behind her, she could hear the security forces arriving, their voices sharp with urgency and fear. Secure the area. Lethal force authorized. All civilians evacuate immediately. The human must not be allowed to escape. She collapsed against a wall in one of the inner corridors, gasping for breath as the adrenaline slowly faded. In the relative quiet, doubt began to creep into her mind. The human Marcus had seemed confused, even afraid. Not at all like the ruthless conqueror of legend. His eyes haunted her. There had been intelligence there, yes, and strength. But also gentleness. Pain. Even a hint of loneliness that resonated with something deep in her own heart. The sound of energy weapons charging echoed from the crash site, followed by shouts and the distinctive whine of stun bolts. They were hunting him like a dangerous predator, but what if the stories were wrong? What if her people's ancient fears had condemned an innocent traveler? Zara pressed her hands against her temples, trying to sort through the chaos in her mind. Every rational thought told her to report to the security station, to tell them everything she knew about the encounter. But something else, some instinct she couldn't name, made her hesitate. The human had asked for help. Just help. And she had responded with the one thing that might get him killed. Making a decision that would change the course of her life, Zara pushed away from the wall and began moving back toward the crash site. Not to report to security, but to find out the truth about Marcus Reed and the species that had haunted her people's nightmares for generations. If she was wrong, she might be walking toward her death. But if she was right, if the humans weren't the monsters of legend, then she had just doomed an innocent man to die for the crime of needing assistance. Either way, she had to know the truth.